The nation's longest-running traveling celebration of traditional arts, the National Folk Festival comes to downtown Jackson for the first time, November 7th through the 9th. A fun-filled weekend for the entire family, exploring roots, richness, and variety of American culture. Non-stop music and dance, folk life demonstrations, hands-on children's activities, signature Southern foods, crafts, and more showcasing the best of America, the best of Mississippi, all free. We'll see you in November. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB. Your stories, our mission.
Think Radio, this is the Sit Down with Russ Latino, where we explore the ideas and people that are shaping Mississippi's future. Today we're going to do a little bit something different. We normally have a guest in and explore what they're doing, but today we kind of wanted to cover and catch up on a lot of politics going on in your community, in the state, at a national level, and so we're going to talk about all three. Before I do that, I want to say hello to Germaine Flood in the booth.
Good morning, Russ.
Good morning to you. It feels like it's been a little while.
It has been a little while, but you know what's great about it being a little while? We go on another vacation after this.
We do. You're talking about 4th of July?
That's it.
Yeah, so, normally I am also donned in a sports coat of some sort.
Yes.
But I feel like it with being 4th of July week, it's summer, it's ungodly hot outside.
It is.
That I went a little casual today. We got the Columbia fishing shirt going on.
I love it. And you know what I don't like about y'all call them sport coats, but they're not really for sport.
No, they're not. It shows you how formal people used to be.
That's right.
Is what that is. It's not quite a suit.
That's
so
right.
It must be for sport.
That's right.
Right. I have started to watch this show Bridgerton. Have you seen this?
Have I? I know everything. I know all the special seasons and all.
So, I mean, it is a tawdry soap opera.
That's
is
right.
what it is.
That's right.
And it doesn't move at an incredibly quick pace.
No.
But, I almost feel like I've watched everything there is to watch on Netflix. So I was like, okay.
Let me get in.
I've heard people talk about this show. Let me watch it. Well, I've watched now a season and a half of it.
Okay.
But in the second season, they go out to their country estate.
Okay. Yeah.
And they play what is essentially croquet.
Yes.
But they're all dressed to the nines, right?
Yeah, like, full garb.
That was their sports coat, right? It's like, it's 110 degrees outside. Let me see how quickly I can sweat through 9 layers.
That's right.
Anyway. But look, this is a great week. I love the 4th of July.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite holidays ever, in part because Christmas is awesome for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the sentimental buildup. There's the spiritual element of Christmas that obviously is central for folks who are believers like myself. And it's awesome, but it's also stressful.
For some people who like to not celebrate holidays for a whole month, the 4th of July is perfect.
It is perfect. It's not stressful. You don't have to worry about gifts. Right? You can show up in a Columbia fishing shirt.
Family is coming, though.
Yeah, of
family's
course.
coming. Okay.
There's barbecue.
That's right.
You get to blow up only the best artillery made by the Chinese.
Yes.
I mean, it's a fun holiday.
Yeah.
What do you got planned?
I am actually heading to New Orleans for Essence Festival with my bestie.
There you go. That'll be fun.
That'll be my 4th of July plan.
They do fireworks in New Orleans.
Yes.
If you're into that sort of thing.
I used to be into it, but my dog is my main concern, and she does not like it.
I have seen more and more people start to talk about that element of fireworks, right? What it does to animals.
So, yeah. What you getting into?
I shan't brag anymore about shooting off fireworks now. I feel bad. No,
you're
look,
fine.
Every year the kids have over friends, and we do fireworks and hot dogs and hamburgers.
It's going to be good.
It's all American, and we'll do it again. Although every single year after I've bought the fireworks, I always sort of grimace because it's like they're not cheap, and they're especially not cheap anymore given where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And tariffs and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then it's like, 10, 15 minutes later, you're done.
They're done, and you've burnt up all your money.
And you're like, holy cow, that was a lot of money for 15 minutes of entertainment.
You had to hit record.
Yeah. Well, but plus I'm the guy down by the edge of our lot where we shoot them off.
Yeah.
Shooting them, right? So the kids and the wife and family friends all are entertained by Russ.
That's good.
Lighting the fireworks, but like I kind of am in a, oh my gosh, don't let me get hit. Yeah.
Well, here's a funny story. I told it Friday of last week. My father used to be the one who liked to shoot fireworks as well. And one day he shot a bottle rocket in and hit me in my thigh. So it's great that you're careful.
Yeah. Well, I've been hit before. I'll share this little tidbit too. This was years ago. I worked at a church down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, First Baptist of Gulfport, and worked with youth. And one of our students was special. Mm-hmm. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. And he decided that it would be a good idea to take an entire pack of sparklers and duct tape them together and then light them.
Yes.
And in case you don't know, one sparkler, not dangerous.
Yeah.
A bundle of sparklers put together.
It becomes a torch.
In fact, dangerous.
Yes.
So anyway, I had to take the kid to the hospital. And then I had to explain to Mama why the kid wasn't always there. Yeah. So, this is not my fault. Your kid, as you well know, is special.
Everybody, please do not be extra special this 4th, okay?
Yeah, be careful. Be careful. Whatever you do, be careful.
That's it.
Sometimes libations combined with fireworks
it makes things specialer.
Yield additional levels of risk. I'm just saying. But anyway, it's a great time of year. It's a slow time of year. I feel like I've missed 2 of the last 4 weeks with business, and then my grandmother passing.
My condolences to you.
Well, thank you. And look, she lived an incredibly full life. The funeral was this weekend, and it was nothing short of a celebration.
That's amazing.
That's good stuff. Lived 88 years, was very much the matriarch of our family. I spent summers down at her house when I was a kid. And she just had an impact on everybody. I mean, it's incredible. Normally, when you get to that age and you have a funeral, it's not a big group of people that show up. Because your peers have started to also die off or they're less able to get out. There weren't enough seats.
Wall to wall.
There weren't enough seats. And that's a testament to the kind of impact she had on everybody. She's a great encourager. But I feel bad that I missed an opportunity to see you guys and talk about what's going on.
We make sure we put family first here, and we send our condolences to you and yours.
Well, very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
Lots has been happening, though.
A ton.
A ton. At every level, too, right? We've got new mayors that are coming in.
Yeah.
Senator John Horn, I guess, stopped being Senator John Horn yesterday.
Inaugurated.
And became Mayor John Horn of Jackson. I know there are people listening from across the state. But I think most of those people recognize that Jackson is important. It is obviously the capital of our state. It is the largest population in our state. So much of what happens around our economy starts in Jackson, whether it's public policy that impacts economic opportunities, or it's just the fact that as big as it is, it's kind of an engine for growth and economic opportunity. And so what happens in Jackson matters to the whole state, and clearly this is a change, a new direction, a new opportunity. I think there are lots of people excited. I noticed, Germaine, on the Jackson website even, that it's now, at least as of yesterday, showed it as being under construction.
Yeah, that was the big talk yesterday in the news, how everything got pulled down, and I think people were just waiting on it to get put back up so they could see what it looks like now.
Yeah. And they've already changed the slogan of the city.
Yes, and I think everybody's sitting on pins and needles waiting to see if that sticks.
If that's
the final confirmation.
So I will say this: when I saw it, for the last several years, it's been the city with soul,
right?
Which I think fits. I think it's good branding.
It is a soulful city.
Yeah, I think it's good branding. And then yesterday, I think it said the city with vision and results.
That's it.
Feels a little more corporate. Right?
It does a little, yes.
So from the city with soul to the city without soul.
Yeah.
But, I think everybody genuinely wants to see what happens, right? They want to see how Senator Horn will move the city. And look, whether you've been a detractor of Jackson or a champion of Jackson, we should all want for it to be successful.
That's
and
right.
so I think this is a good day for the city. And that's true across the state. You saw a lot of new mayors stepping into roles. Obviously, there was that big race in Gulfport that Hugh Keating won, where he's stepping into that role after Billy Hughes had been there for what seemed like a really long time. And I think by all accounts, Mayor Hughes had done a good job and was really well respected in the city of Gulfport. So they're turning over a new leaf. Lots of examples of that. Vicksburg's another example of that. I did see something funny a couple of weeks ago, and maybe you saw this in Vicksburg, is that they
Vicksburg is a big one, and my folks are from there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, you probably saw this then, and I'm late on this news, but the city council and outgoing Mayor Flaggs on the way out reduced the mayor's salary by, I think, 20%.
I saw that.
I mean, maybe there's a reason for that, but
I did see that.
I don't really know what it is.
I did see that.
I'm sure there's some putative reason.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems
he was there for a minute, so on the way out, he wanted to tweak a little.
It just strikes me that if you thought that the mayor was overcompensated, then that would have included
himself.
Yourself. Just saying. Anyway. Well, look, we're going to take a break, and when we come back from said break, one, we'll open up the phone lines and have some conversation for anybody who wants to have.
That's right.
What is a fun and lively conversation today. And we're going to talk about new laws that took effect in Mississippi yesterday, how they're going to impact you. We're going to talk a little bit about that one big, beautiful bill and what it means for Mississippi. All of this coming right back with us on the sit down. We'll be back in just a sec.
That's right. And if you want to join the conversation, 1-866-MPB-RING. That's 1-866-672-7464.
The nation's longest running traveling celebration of traditional arts, the National Folk Festival, comes to downtown Jackson for the first time, November 7th through the 9th. A fun-filled weekend for the entire family, exploring roots, richness, and variety of American culture. Non-stop music and dance, folk life demonstrations, hands-on children's activities, signature Southern foods, crafts, and more showcasing the best of America, the best of Mississippi, all free. We'll see you in November. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Mississippi is a place of deep roots where every story matters and every voice can be heard. At MPB, we stand with our local communities, bringing you the voices of those who shape our state through local programming that reflects our culture across small towns to big cities, from the Delta to the coast. We tell the stories that define us, from the music that carries our voices to the leaders who inspire change. MPB brings you the heart of Mississippi, celebrating Mississippi one story at a time. MPB, your stories, our mission.
Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. Today we're doing a little bit of a different type of show. We want to take your calls if you want to get involved in the conversation. We're talking about local, state, and national politics, specifically looking at the bills that have gone into effect in Mississippi from this past legislative session, and looking a little bit about what's going on with that one big, beautiful bill that you keep hearing about in Washington, D.C. What all is in it? What is it going to do for Mississippians? How could it impact you? We'll dive into all of that here in a bit. You want to give out that phone number one more time?
Call and fire those thoughts off at 1-866-MPB-RING. That's 1-866-672-7464.
So, yesterday, July 1st, the start of a new fiscal year for the state of Mississippi, meaning that Monday, June 30th, was the end of the past fiscal year. The official legislative budget office numbers have not come out yet, but Governor Tate Reeves did post on social media yesterday that June revenue collections had come in $33 million above estimate. That means that for the year, the state collected slightly more than they estimated they would collect over the course of the year. I think that was important for a couple of reasons. One, because there had been a lot of conversation around what would happen as the COVID money worked its way through the system. Would revenue collections stay as high as they've been? The answer to that appears, at least at this point, to be a yes. Most of the COVID money has sort of percolated through the system at this point. There's still some unspent dollars, but they're not big pockets of dollars. And so it looks like revenue is holding steady. The other part was we've had a series of very large tax cuts over the last 10 years. Of course, the latest batch that was passed this year just started to take effect on Tuesday, yesterday. But then we had big tax cuts in 2016, a big tax cut in 2022, another big business tax cut in 2023. And so you had all of those things combined, and a lot of folks were looking at it going, well, how will this eventually impact the revenue picture? At least to date, it hasn't dramatically impacted the revenue picture because what we've seen is growth in the overall economy. The end result of that is that over the last few years, sales taxes have come in higher than anticipated, and individual income taxes, even with the cuts, have come in higher than anticipated, which means one of two things, and probably both. There are more people working, which is a net positive, and the labor force participation rate numbers show that there are more people working in Mississippi now. The other is that wages are starting to go up. And so both of those things are net positives. We closed the year with a little over $7.6 billion in general fund tax receipts, which is a big increase from where we were pre-COVID. I mean, pre-COVID, you were looking at $5.7 billion, $5.6 billion. So really big increases there. Not only are we looking at sort of the fiscal health of the state of Mississippi, though, I think we're also looking at what are the laws that got passed and how are they going to impact us, not in a retrospective way, but moving forward. Obviously, a big piece of that was the tax reform that passed this year. Right. HB 1 was a big, controversial at times piece of legislation that tried to do a lot of different things. I will tell you that what you should be seeing is that when you go to the grocery store and buy groceries, the sales tax on your groceries should have gone from 7 cents per dollar spent to 5 cents per dollar spent. So that's an initial little break when you're buying groceries, when you're buying those hot dogs and hamburgers.
Let me tell you about that 5%. That makes it easier for mathing.
It does make it a lot easier for mathing. If you're one of those people that refuses to look at that line and just wants to calculate it on your own.
Me.
Much easier. No, I'd say 10% would be even easier, but I don't want to pay twice the amount of sales tax.
We do not.
But if math was the goal.
That's it.
So that should be going down. Now, if you go to fill up your car at the gas pump, what you will notice is, maybe you'll notice and maybe you won't, because this actually doesn't appear as a line item on your receipt, is that the fuel tax has gone up by 3 cents.
Okay.
And so I remember
the 7.
Sure. So I remember having this conversation with somebody years ago, and they refused to believe that there was a tax on their gasoline. Refused to believe it. And their reasoning was, when I get the receipt at the pump,
it doesn't say.
There's not a line that says, here's what the tax is.
Yeah.
But you pay 18.4 cents in federal excise tax on fuel. That's built into the price of a gallon of gas. And now you pay 21.4 cents for state excise taxes on fuel. It was also 18.4.
Okay.
And that will go up another 3 cents next year and another 3 cents after that, and then we'll level out.
Okay.
Now, the big part of this are the income tax reductions. So the income tax rate will go down to 4% this year, and then in subsequent years will go down essentially by 0.25%.
What does that mean for us, Russ?
It means that for working people, there is a net cut.
Okay.
There is a net cut, right?
Okay.
So if you're looking at the grocery tax reduction, the income tax reduction, and then what's going on with the gas tax, and you were to math it all out, you would see that for almost every working person, there's a pretty good chunk net cut in the amount of taxes that they'll pay. That will especially be true assuming that it phases all the way it's supposed to, and you eventually have no income tax applied at the state level.
Got it.
And then it's a substantial net cut for the average person.
Okay.
And I've done the numbers before. I don't want to just sit here and fib off the top of my head, but it's sizable.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So all of that's going down.
Good news.
That same bill had reforms to the public employee retirement system, the PERS system. And so it created a new Tier 5 for new employees. We've had Daniel Sparks on to explain that before. Daniel does a great job of explaining that, sort of why it was needed, what it does. You can go back and listen to that episode on Spotify.
That is where
Apple.
you can go.
You can go find it on our YouTube live stream, all of that there. But that doesn't actually take effect until March of 2026.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a window there where most of these other laws are taking effect immediately. The legislature passed a series of DEI bans this past year. Those are in federal court right now. So in front of Judge Henry Wingate, who is notorious for being very quick in his rulings.
Okay. I don't know Judge Wingate.
I'm being very sarcastic. He's a great guy.
I love you, Russ.
I'm being very sarcastic. When I was practicing law, we had a case in front of him that had been pending for 9 years.
Yeah.
Just
That's how quick and speedy.
as a point of reference. Anyway, I better never go back and practice law again. It's the short version of this. But no, so that's in front of Judge Wingate. I think there's a request for a TRO that's pending on those laws. If you're a state employee, they created a new paid parental leave program that is taking effect, 6 weeks of paid parental leave for new parents who are working in state government. Let's see, there was some wine and booze and drug laws that are taking effect.
So now you can get it to the door, the wine.
You can order the wine and have it shipped to your door like an adult, which is great.
It is.
For those of us who believe adults should be able to make adult decisions.
Or give other adults gifts like that.
Yeah, we were a little late compared to most states,
That's
but
right.
Sometimes better late than never.
That's right.
So that's happening. On the drug side, there's a restriction on kratom that'll be taking effect. It's still available, but I think it will be harder to come by. It restricted purchases to only those who are over 21 can now purchase it, and I think it's got to be sort of locked away.
Russ, I must be just the most naive person, but I have no idea what kratom is, and I never Googled it. That's okay, though.
It's supposed to be, as I understand it, or at least it's been billed by people who are supportive of its availability, as a alternative to wean people off of serious drugs like heroin.
Okay,
as
got
an
it.
example.
Got it.
But there are a lot of people, including those in law enforcement, who believe that it serves as its own gateway and offers its own deleterious effects.
Okay.
So there's been debate as to whether or not to ban it or restrict it. The state of Mississippi, unlike some other states, decided not to completely ban it, but to restrict it to people over the age of 21, make it harder to get your hands on.
Okay.
A series of laws taking effect in Jacktown and really, I guess, everywhere in the state, but in a lot of ways, this was designed for Jackson and some of the problems facing Jackson, dealing with camping on public property, restrictions on that.
Yeah, I heard that.
Panhandling permits, squatters' rights. All of those things, I think, were designed to address some of the problems seen in Jackson. Those are bills that Representative Shonda Yates initiated, who is a representative from Jackson, and then I think Senator Josh Harkins was her counterpart on those bills in the state Senate. The legislature implemented a new law to allow colleges to directly pay athletes. This is consistent with recent court rulings. So this changes a little bit the name, image, and likeness debate in that we don't have to pretend like we're not just directly paying players.
Now we can pay them.
This allows colleges to directly pay them. Let's see. Other things to mention. Seafood labeling will be the last one I mentioned.
Domestic or
imported.
Yeah.
We need to let people know that. I guess.
If I'm a look, and I'm gonna try my best to see domestic as much as possible.
I think people will be shocked to know how much of the seafood they buy
Is imported.
And I think people would be equally shocked to figure out how expensive and how limited the supply would be if we weren't importing seafood.
So I wonder, not just on packaging, possibly when you go to the restaurant, this may be indulged to you?
Yeah, so, I mean, you remember there was that controversy with Mary Mahoney's, where they got, I think, hit by the courts for like $1 million, a little over $1 million, because they were advertising that they were selling Gulf Coast seafood, and apparently a lot of it wasn't from the Gulf Coast. So I think the bigger problem comes into play when you're publicly representing, hey, we only sell stuff that got pulled out of those square miles right off the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Right.
And that is, in fact, not true.
Got it.
You know, I guess it's all right to let consumers know where things are coming from. I think if the goal would be to restrict so that we're only using domestic supply, people are going to be shocked at how expensive things get.
Yeah.
It turns out some of that stuff from Vietnam and Southeast Asia is produced rather cheaply and sold in bulk. And it allows people in Jackson or Oxford or wherever in North Mississippi to have access to seafood that they otherwise wouldn't have access to.
You're right.
So we've got a caller, Hugh in Ocean Springs, very interested in, it looks like, the gas tax and federal spending. Hugh, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, and thank you for taking my call. Regarding, I'm a total Gulf Coast seafood kind of guy,
Yeah, no, it's great. I grew up on it.
That's not why I'm calling, but I completely agree. People would be shocked at the cost of socks, shoes, pants, shirts, tires, pick something, and it's going to cost a lot more if it's made in America.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's, and people can decide for themselves whether or not that's the right way to go.
What they want to pay for.
Yep.
Yeah, and like I said, that's not why I'm calling.
Okay.
But that was just your last comment. I was just curious, does all of the gas tax go to the Department of Transportation?
Yeah, so it all flows through the Department of Transportation. Now, it doesn't all necessarily go to roads and bridges, right? So there's intermodal transportation that the Department of Transportation also oversees, includes things like the airports and the port down there in Gulfport. Yeah.
So forth.
Yeah, but it'll all flow through the Department of Transportation.
So it's not going to a general fund and then taken out for the Department of Transportation. It goes directly to the Department of Transportation.
That's correct. That's correct. The Department of Transportation, with very limited instances of like special spending, is not a general fund agency.
Well, I'm glad to learn that. And then secondly, earlier in the program, you said, we're going to talk about local, state, and federal ideas and stuff, and Mississippi is a state, as best I can tell, gets between 44 and 48% of its state budget from the federal government. And what's the legislature going to do with the big, beautiful bill that tends to cut federal funding?
Yeah, so
right now, the education funding is being withheld, I think, until they decide how much of the, 66 million or whatever the number is.
Yeah, so what I would say and I want to get into this a little bit deeper into the program, so I certainly will address your question in short form now and in long form later. I think it's unclear at this point how it's going to impact the state budget. It is my belief, right before we hop to break, that it won't be nearly as intense as some people are portraying it to be. And I'll explain why when we come back from break. But Hugh, I appreciate your phone call and appreciate you listening. If you're listening today, we do want to hear your phone calls. Germaine, give the phone number one more time before we hop.
That's 1-877. I've been reprimanded. I said 1-866 before. It is not. It is 1-877 MPB ring. Like I don't do this 5 days a week. Again, 1-877 MPB ring. That's 1-877-672-7464. We want to hear from you.
Absolutely. We're going to take a brief break. Be right back. You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
The Measuring Show.
Since 1970, MPB has been enriching the lives of Mississippians.
Everything we do gives us the chance to grow and learn.
With your support, we are always there whenever and wherever you need us. Together through the years, together in the future. Please consider making a donation at mpbfoundation.org. MPB, your stories, our mission. The nation's longest running traveling celebration of traditional arts, the National Folk Festival, comes to downtown Jackson for the first time, November 7th through the 9th. A fun-filled weekend for the entire family, exploring roots, richness, and variety of American culture. Non-stop music and dance, folk life demonstrations, hands-on children's activities, signature Southern foods, crafts, and more showcasing the best of America, the best of Mississippi, all free. We'll see you in November. More at nationalfolkfestival.com.
MPB Think Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. Today we're catching up on some political news. We've talked a little bit about what's going on at the community level with new mayors taking effect and stepping into office. We've talked a little bit about new laws taking effect in the state of Mississippi, what that means for folks. Big tax bill obviously was a big point of conversation during this past legislative cycle. And then right before the break, we got a caller who wanted to get into some of the questions around federal spending and how that's going to impact Mississippi, and I think it's a good opportunity to talk about that one big beautiful bill, as the president likes to call it. It's been a subject of a lot of conversation congressionally, a subject of a lot of conversation in the media. It is huge in terms of everything that is in it, and I cannot possibly give you every single thing that's in it, but I will try and hit some high points for you today.
Thanks, Russ.
And then also, unless you have 4 hours.
Yeah, thanks, Russ.
And a penchant for misery. No. So we'll talk about some of the high points.
Okay.
I think it's important at the front end to recognize that the bill is first and foremost a tax bill. There's a lot of conversation around what's going on with certain programs. Certainly that those things are worth conversation, but it is first and foremost a tax bill. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was passed in 2017, which was Trump's sort of signature piece of legislation in his first term, what it did was it doubled the standard deduction for most families, which meant at the time that if you were married filing jointly, there were two of you in a household, and you were filing jointly, you went from a $12,000 standard deduction to a $24,000 standard deduction. This was done for a few reasons. One of the reasons was essentially to lighten the load on maybe lower income earners, because for a lot of people, if you can take a $24,000 standard deduction, you actually have very little income on top of that you end up paying federal taxes on, particularly once you start taking credits and whatnot on top of that. The other thing that it was done is they were trying to simplify the tax code. So instead of people going through every year and having to figure out what they gave to charity and what their mortgage deduction was and all of that, that you could just take this one big number, 24,000, and it's bigger than that now because it's gone up with inflation. You would take that one big number and you wouldn't have to do all the itemized deductions. So it would cut down on the burden on the taxpayer. It would also cut down on the burden, candidly, on the IRS.
Okay.
Because they wouldn't have to go through and figure out, well, is this itemization correct or not correct, right? And so that was the thought process on the standardized deductions that applies to everybody, whether you're making, $5,000 a year or whether you're making, $40 million a year, right? It's the same as $24,000 standard deduction. And then across the board, they took the rates down. So every income bracket rate, we've got a progressive tax structure in this country at the federal level. Every bracket went down.
Okay.
And so the end result of it was you had less income that was even taxable because of the standard deduction getting bigger. And then the rate applied to what was taxable went down so that you were paying less. And that was true for everybody up and down the income stream. You sometimes will hear people say, well, it was a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. The reason that millionaires or billionaires got a larger raw number of dollars that they weren't paying in taxes anymore is because they pay the most to begin with.
Okay.
And so the top 1% of all earners in this country pay 46% of income taxes. The top 10% of all earners in this country pay 77% of federal income taxes. It used to be 70% pre-Tax Cut and Jobs Act. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act actually had the effect of shifting more of the overall burden onto wealthier earners. And it was because of that standardized deduction. Anyway, I say that all as framework to say that the biggest part of the One Big Beautiful Bill is whether or not to continue the Tax Cut and Jobs Act.
Okay.
And if they don't continue the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the end result is a $4 trillion tax increase on Americans. So a lot of people are talking about this as a new tax cut. Most of it is actually, do we continue what we're currently doing, or do we allow a hike to take effect?
Okay.
Which I would argue would be bad for most people, right? Most income earners.
That's what I was going to ask about the low income earners. How does this work for them?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that, because they doubled the standard deduction, and it's the reason I led with that, is the percentage of people who pay no federal income taxes has actually gone up. So roughly 50% of all earners are not paying federal income taxes once you factor in the standard deduction credits, et cetera.
Okay.
And so at some level, if you're not paying anything, you really can't get an additional tax cut. But you are getting the benefit of not paying anything, in part because of that law, if that makes any sense. The other thing is that the law increased the amount for the tax credit for children. So we went from a $1,000 tax credit per child to a $2,000 tax credit per child. And so if the law was to be rolled back, the tax credit for children would go back down to $1,000.
Okay.
And so those are all things that factor in to the biggest part of the bill. Then on top of that, you've got all these new tax breaks, right? And some of these things, and this is where I'll insert Russ' opinion, some of these things are goofy in my opinion, right? Like, so the no tax on tips is a lovely sounding concept.
Okay.
We all know people who work for tips. They work hard.
Right.
It's, we respect what they do. But look, I've talked about New Orleans on this show and how much I love it. There are restaurants in New Orleans where the waiters are making easily into the six figures.
Okay.
Easily into the six figures. And so you look at that and you go, okay, is their income any different than, or should it be taxed any different than a teacher that's making $50,000 a year, right? And I would argue that just because it came in the form of tips doesn't change the fact that, hey, you're making a really good living as a waiter at Galatoire's or whatever.
Right.
So that's why historically the IRS has tried to treat income the same, right? No matter where it came from or how you got it, they try and treat it the same so that you don't end up with these weird situations where maybe somebody who works on tips doesn't make a lot, but maybe they make an awful lot. And they don't really, they haven't done anything to deserve that additional tax break. Same thing with overtime at some level, right? So those sorts of things are new provisions. There's also a push to increase the amount of tax credit for children. So all of that on the tax side is on the table. I think the other stuff are really questions around, okay, how do you quote unquote pay for tax cuts, right? Because simultaneously, we've got $37 trillion in national debt. We've got this huge deficit that's been growing. how do you pay for those things that you want to do in addition to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act in terms of cuts? I would say this, and this is where I will make clear this is Russ's opinion. I've always struggled with this idea of I'm going to let you keep what you earned and treat it as an expense to the government. And part of that is that in my mind, that framework almost assumes that what people earn belongs to the government to begin with, and them letting you keep it is some sort of benevolence on the part of government, right? But government itself didn't earn the money, right? The person who rolled up their sleeves and waited on tables or turned a wrench or whatever it is, they earn that money. And so I kind of hate treating it as an expense to government when we're talking about letting people keep more of their own money. But that's the way that the accountants up in D.C. do it.
Okay.
And so part of it is like, okay, well, if you're going to do these tax cuts, are you going to reduce spending? And there's some wisdom in that analysis, if for no other reason that if you keep spending at a very high level and reduce the amount of taxes that you're taking in, all you're really doing is deferring a tax increase.
I just want to know, is this some of what Elon was arguing?
Yeah, so I think there are two sets of arguments. Like there's a far right argument against it and there's a far left argument against it.
Yeah.
And I think the far right argument against it is unless you're willing to also cut spending, what you're doing with taxes is reckless.
Right.
And it looks like, okay, you're going to give us permanent $2 trillion deficits every year.
Yeah.
So at some point, there's got to be a tax increase to deal with the national debt, the growing national debt.
Right.
So are you financing a tax cut today on the backs of your children and your grandchildren? And to me, that's a really valid argument. Now, I would say that also if it were me, I would extend the Tax Cut and Jobs Act because I don't think our economy can take a $4 trillion tax hike right now. But what I wouldn't be doing is adding all of these additional new cuts to the kitty because I think it's pretty irresponsible, especially when you look at the spending side. So are we up against a break here?
Yeah. So
let's take a break. Okay. When we come back, I'll talk about the spending side of this thing. And really, the thing that people have focused on is there going to be a reduction in federal spending that hurts Mississippians, that hurts our ability to fund our state government? And so we'll dig into what it looks like for Medicaid, what it looks like for SNAP right after the break. You're listening to The Sit Down with Russ Latino. We'll be back in just a moment.
At the Mississippi Arts and Entertainment Experience in Meridian, we believe in the power of the arts, storytelling, and education, just like Mississippi Public Broadcasting. MPB connects communities across the state with quality programs that inform, inspire, and engage. Their audience is loyal and appreciative of businesses that support public broadcasting, which makes underwriting on MPB a smart investment. Join us in supporting MPB. Learn more at mpbfoundation.org.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bobby Rush. As a blues man, I love Mississippi Public Broadcasting. If you support Mississippi music and their local programming, donate now, right now, and become a member today, not tomorrow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Doesn't matter how big or small, but we prefer big. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Desiree Frazier, host of the award-winning news program, Mississippi Edition. We bring you conversations about the latest news from across the Magnolia State. Whether it's politics, healthcare, or education, you'll hear in-depth discussions on issues that matter to you. So join us each weekday morning at 8:30 on MPB Think Radio, or download the podcast, listen through the app, and online.
Radio. I'm your host, Russ Latino. We're talking all things political today, local, state, and now federal with the One Big Beautiful Bill. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about the tax implications of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And I was mentioning really that, the biggest part of the entire bill is a continuation of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act from 2017. Without it, you'd see your individual income taxes going up, the standard deduction would go down, the child tax credit would go down. They've built a lot of stuff on top of it in terms of new cuts that have raised concern about sort of the fiscal responsibility of all of these cuts against what are less than concrete spending cuts on the other side and what that does to the deficit. I know, Germaine, you were mentioning Elon Musk criticism. I think a lot of that criticism is well warranted in terms of like looking at the long-term fiscal trajectory for our country. And so, I told Byron Brown, I was on his program last week. I said it's a little bit like a turd sandwich. There are parts of it that I feel like we absolutely need, or it's going to be negative, and there are parts of it that I'm like, yeah, but there's a turd. So it's a mixed bag. I would say this though, a lot of the spending stuff raises concern for different reasons. So we're going from trying to cut spending while simultaneously increasing immigration spending by $150 billion, increasing military spending by $150 billion. Both of those things may be good, and they may be the right decision, but it creates a math problem if your goal is to reduce the deficit and the debt. Certainly for Mississippi, the $150 billion in new military spending is great. We have a vibrant shipbuilding industry on the coast that will create more jobs and more spending on the Mississippi Gulf Coast that will impact the entire state positively. It's just when you look at it in the context of that big debt picture, it's like at some point one of these two things has got to give.
What's your take on the Medicaid portion of
it?
So I had to do that because Southern Remedy's coming up now.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. I mean, the first thing that I would say is that when you're talking about cuts to Medicaid, it's important to understand that that is not an average person's understanding of what a spending cut looks like. If the Medicaid budget will, in fact, increase by 25% over the next 10 years, even with this bill.
Okay.
So it's not like we're spending less overall. It is a reduction in the rate of spending growth. And I think there are lots of questions about how exactly that's going to happen. One of the important things to realize, though, is that the primary mechanism is to say that people who are able-bodied working adults or of working age and are able-bodied, that they have to work 80 hours a month, which is 20 hours a week, in order to be eligible for the benefit. Right now, about 44% of people in those expansion states, Mississippi's not one of these, in those expansion states have full-time jobs and are also part of the Medicaid expansion population. About 64% have either full-time or part-time jobs. And so you've got a third of all the people who are on the Medicaid expansion population who are able-bodied, not disabled, who are not working at all. And this bill would require those people to work 80 hours. So the effect of that in Mississippi, being that we're not an expansion state, is actually very, very small.
Okay.
And so I think it's important to realize it doesn't affect the Children's Health Insurance Program in any way. It doesn't change Medicaid eligibility for children. This is another change that I think affects expansion states, but not necessarily Mississippi right now, is that it's set up in a way that if you earn over the federal poverty limit, which makes you part of the Medicaid expansion population, that there is a copay or a cost sharing element that's capped at 5% of your income. And so again, that's one of those things that doesn't affect kids, doesn't affect their eligibility for Medicaid in any way, and really is something that would affect us if we were an expansion state. So initially, I don't think the impact is going to be a super big impact.
Because we are being told that, I guess, a lot of millions of people are going to lose Medicaid, and that's the talking point on top of that.
It is, but I don't see how, based on the way that the bill is currently constructed. Now, it may be that there are people in states that are expansion states, if folks choose not to go out and either get education or get a job and work at least 20 hours a week, that they would no longer be eligible. But that doesn't seem applicable here unless we pass expansion. And so I think a lot of that in Mississippi is probably overblown. The one thing that would potentially impact Mississippi is the provider tax change. So, and I've only got a couple minutes. I'll try and explain this really quickly. right now, states pay a portion of their required contribution to Medicaid through provider taxes. And the way that works is effectively that federal Medicaid dollars go to hospitals and providers. They send a portion of that back to the state, and the state counts those dollars as if it is their contribution to Medicaid. Democrats and Republicans, President Barack Obama, President Joe Biden, and Republican presidents have all said that's a sham, right? The states are effectively using federal dollars as if they are state dollars, and they're not contributing their portion to the program. And so that could impact in Mississippi, but that's something that in a bipartisan way, people have been saying this is a shell game that needs to get fixed.
Yeah.
The only other thing I'd mention is with SNAP, benefits, is that if you look at that, really all that they did was to say that there's an existing work requirement in SNAP that rolls off when you turn 55 right now under the law. They're saying that you have to work until you're 64 to continue getting benefits, which I think most people listening would say like 64 or 65 is a normal retirement age anyway. The other part of that is that in 2029, if states haven't brought their error rate down under 6%, they would start to have to pay a portion of the SNAP benefits. Right now, it's federally funded, right? And so right now, Mississippi is about 8%. But that error rate is essentially overpayments to ineligible people. And so what they're trying to do, at least at face value, is create an incentive for states to control their own eligibility standards a little bit. But assuming we were able in the next 5 years to get it down under 6%, there would be no additional cost to the state.
Yeah. We need a part 2.
Yeah.
Where you can give us more.
Well, I don't know if anybody really wants more.
We need it.
But I would say this, there's a lot of confusion right now about what this bill does and doesn't do. I think some of it is overblown. I think some of it is completely legitimate. I think a lot of it we won't know. I'll Nancy Pelosi this. We won't know until we pass it and find out what's actually in it. I saw there was a provision there that essentially changed the way taxes are charged on gambling winnings.
Part 2.
That nobody's talked about. Anyway, all for part 2. The Sit Down is a production of Mississippi Public Broadcasting Think Radio, funded by generous contributions from listeners like you. Today's show was produced by Germaine Flood, with live stream production by Abram Nanny. I'm Russ Latino. Stay tuned for Southern Remedy right here at 11 a.m. and join us here next week for a new episode of The Sit Down, only on MPB Think Radio. See you next week.